the Goodreads Choice Awards. They come back every single year, and every single year I tell myself it's the last time I'm going to put myself through the sometimes stressful, sometimes surprising, sometimes completely baffling experience that is reading all of the winners and giving my completely subjective opinion about whether or not I think they should have won. But listen, as much as last year I thought to myself, it's the last time, another year has come and gone, and I kind of want to do it again. This may be a sign of literary masochism, but regardless, I'm gonna do it. So get comfy, grab a tea or a coffee, maybe a cozy blanket. Chill with me while we go through all the winners of the Goodreads Choice Awards for 2022. I read almost every single one of the winners with a little asterisk. We'll talk about it when we get there. And I'm going to let you know my thoughts on the winner, my review and rating. I'm going to let you know if I think it deserved to win. And then also if I happen to have read one or more of the other nominees in the category, I'll let you know if I think those maybe deserve the win a little bit more than the winner we got. In all seriousness, I think the reason I keep coming back to this video idea, this reading challenge year after year, is that while there definitely are aspects of it that feel a little bit like literary masochism, I have every single year found at least one new favorite book that I never would have read otherwise. And this year is certainly no exception. I'm very excited to share my thoughts. There are some winners. There are some questionable choices that I have thoughts on. So much to come. Before we get into all of that though, I do want to quickly talk to you about today's video's sponsor, Ana Luisa. I am once again an Ana Luisa partner, and I've been working with them for years. Y'all know I love them. I wear their jewelry literally every single day of my life, and I'm constantly telling y'all to go check them out because their jewelry is amazing. I love that Ana Luisa is focused on both sustainability and accessibility. Their pieces start at $39 and go up from there, so there's really something for everyone, and their sustainability practices are really what drew me to them in the first place. They're so committed to constantly improving their sustainability practices, and it's really wonderful to see. I'm loving my new pieces. I decided to create a little bit of an edgier ear stack this time around. So my first and second piercings have these little swords, and then I've got this twisted nail in my third piercing. Just makes me feel ready to share all my unpopular opinions on the internet. I am protected. I decided to pair it with one of my oldest pieces from Ana Luisa, which is still available on their website, and it's the one that I think I get the most questions about when I wear it on the internet and in real life. I love that every single one of Ana Luisa's pieces are both elegant and versatile. I feel like they're so easy to dress up and dress down, and they really accommodate a lot of different styles through their jewelry. Like I said already, there really is something for everyone. I've always been a big lover of jewelry, and I've always felt like jewelry had so much power to give me confidence and help me to sort of portray the version of myself that I'm trying to put out to the world. If I need a little confidence, sometimes something a little edgier can really give me the push I need. Maybe I'm trying to look more like a true functioning adult, and I'll go for something more understated and classic and timeless. The jewelry we choose to wear can tell the world so much about ourselves. It's such a fun method of self-expression, and Ana Luisa is the perfect way to dip your toe into a bunch of different styles at an affordable price while being kind to the planet. Ana Luisa has great prices every single day, but you can click the link in the description box and use my code Elizabeth20 for 20% off. Thank you again to Ana Luisa for sponsoring this video and for partnering with me once again. It is always a pleasure. And now let's hop into the winners of the Goodreads Choice Awards 2022. Starting with the first category, fiction. And the winner with over 90,000 votes was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I have never read anything by this author before. I had heard rumblings about this book a little bit earlier in the year, and I had it on my TBR, but I didn't necessarily feel urgency to get to it. I have literally thousands of books on my TBR. So, it was one of those things like, I'll get to it eventually. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is a book about game developers, video game designers, which is something that I know nothing about. I also don't really play video games at all, but I was still intrigued. So I read it, and let me tell you, it was really good. I gave it 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed this book. I have seen some mixed reviews from other non-video game familiar readers about whether they enjoyed all the video game sections of the book or not. For me, it really worked. I found it super interesting. I don't really know if it's just because I'm a really curious person. I will happily listen to just about anything if it's being told to me from someone who's like passionate about it and excited and wants to share. And the characters in this book were so passionate about what they were doing. Or if it's because I'm a creative person, I'm an artist. So the sort of creation process and all of the different steps that go into that and the self-doubt and the excitement and the exhaustion and everything else, maybe I can just relate to that side of it. But for me, regardless of not being particularly into video games in general, I found it really interesting. I really liked the parts about video game design. I found them just fascinating to read about. And I did find the characters really interesting, though I will say the characters are not the most likable. So depending on you, you know yourself best if you enjoy reading about unlikable characters or not. For me, it really depends. Sam and Sadie, who are our protagonists in this book, are both deeply flawed and pretty unlikable a lot of the time. But I really found it interesting to read about them and to read about their friendship, which is really the central relationship of this book. And it's such a complicated one. And I love, love, love the exploration in books of deep friendships that are multi-layered and complex and not altogether healthy necessarily, that are rough and raw and messy, just like real life relationships. And Sam and Sadie's relationship is nothing if not real and raw and rough and messy. So tick, tick, tick in all of those areas. I did tend to prefer Sam. I found Sam's story really interesting, having survived a really serious car accident as a young child and becoming physically disabled as a result of the accident. The descriptions of his chronic pain, this invisible pain that he was suffering from pretty much constantly, just a really interesting look into something that is not necessarily written about as often in books as one might hope. I also loved Marks, who is sort of an honorary protagonist. He's the best. I love him. And that's all. And the way that things ended up for him was heartbreaking, and I cried a lot. But I won't give spoilers. I'll just say that one chapter, if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. That one chapter was so ridiculously beautifully written that I was simultaneously in awe of the prose while also like totally breaking down and sobbing while I was reading. So good. So if it's not obvious already, I gave this book 5 stars. I loved it. I'm very happy that I read it. Looking at the other books on this list, I do have quite a few on my TBR, but I haven't gotten around to any of them yet. So I can only speak to Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, but based on my experience with it, I definitely think it deserved this win. So 1 point to Goodreads. You picked a good winner. Let's see if we can say the same about any of the other categories. Moving on to mystery and thriller, 2 genres that I quite enjoy. The winner of this category with over 78,000 votes was The Maid by Nita Prose. And I read this book quite a few months ago at this point, I think shortly after it was released. And I'm sad to say I was not a fan. I gave this book 1 star. So that gives you an impression. I didn't hate everything about The Maid, okay? There were things that I liked about it. At the beginning, I was actually thinking that I would quite enjoy it. It felt like it was going to have a bit of a cozy mystery vibe, which I tend to enjoy. But for me, the character of Molly, our protagonist, and the way that the twist and ending were handled just completely unraveled the story for me. So the first issue for me is Molly herself, who is clearly coded as autistic. It's not on the page, and to my knowledge, the author has not publicly acknowledged the fact that Molly is obviously on the autism spectrum. There's a little bit of this sort of diminishing quality to how Molly is described both in the book and by the author in interviews as being socially awkward and quirky. It feels patronizing and uncomfortable to make a character autistic, to make them interesting without actually giving meaningful representation and naming that the character is autistic, and also making sure to responsibly portray what that means and make the character a more fully fleshed 3-dimensional character. Take my opinion on this with a grain of salt. I'm not autistic myself, but I did feel very uncomfortable by sort of the undertone of how Molly was described. And there's this recurring theme in the story of Molly talking about the distinction between people laughing with you and laughing at you. It does often feel like the way the book is written and framed is laughing at Molly, is getting the readers to laugh at Molly instead of with her. And that just feels wrong to me, and I don't like it. So that is the biggest main reason why this book for me was a big mess. And not only is Molly's character a mess in terms of how she's being portrayed, but the other characters are very one-dimensional. Y'all know, if you've watched any of my reading videos, I am a character-driven reader. I want to read about characters that feel real, and none of the characters in this book felt real. They all felt like walking stereotypes, which is not cute. The other reason is that the ending to me really fell apart. I didn't enjoy the twist and the ending. It's both very predictable and also completely out of left field in a way that is not satisfying. So The Maid got 1 star from me, not a fan. And unsurprisingly, because I gave it 1 star, I don't think it deserved to win this category. I've only read one of the other books on this list, which was Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. And to be fair, Wrong Place, Wrong Time was not my favorite. I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. I didn't hate it. I also didn't love it. It was a bit predictable for me, not the most exciting. Basically a brain candy thriller where it's really easy to digest, where it's a really quick, easy, shot of dopamine, but there's not much substance underneath. I would hesitate to say that Wrong Place, Wrong Time deserves to win this category because I didn't think it was that great of a thriller. It was just fine. I haven't read any of the other ones, so I don't know if any of them would have been better. That would be my pick if I had to pick one. Wrong Place, Wrong Time. Moving on to historical fiction, the winner of the historical fiction category with over 100,000 votes was Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And for full transparency, I consciously chose not to read this book. I've read 2 books by Taylor Jenkins Reid in the past, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Malibu Rising. Seven Husbands was a favorite of mine at the time that I read it. I gave it 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. Malibu Rising was okay. I read it, I guess, last year for the Goodreads Choice Awards. I liked it more than I expected to, but it didn't blow me away. But when Carrie Soto's Back was announced and we started to get more info about it, I started hearing a lot of discourse from Latino and Latina creators across the internet about their disappointment to see Taylor Jenkins Reid writing yet another Latina protagonist when she herself is not Latina. I have read a couple interviews with Taylor Jenkins Reid to see how she addresses her readers' concerns, and I have been very underwhelmed, is a polite way to put it, by her response. It seems to me like she's been very dismissive of the critique and is sort of twisting what people are saying in a way that is off-putting to me. I find it really unsettling when authors are super comfortable writing stories about protagonists whose experiences they don't share, and when people who are part of those groups are telling them over and over again that the representation is not accurate and is harmful, that it's based on stereotypes, that it hurts them, and the response is sort of a belittling pushing of that concern aside and making excuses. That just puts me off an author in general. I'm just not particularly interested in reading more stories where she is getting accolades and quite a bit of money and attention and success in her career by essentially appropriating the Latina experience. It doesn't feel right to me. So feel free to let me know, especially if you are Latina or Latino yourself, in the comments what your thoughts are on Taylor Jenkins Reid and this pattern that we are seeing. I just decided to skip this one, and in reading several reviews written by Latina and Latino reviewers, their impressions of this book, I think I probably made the right choice. So obviously, after all that, I don't think that Carrie Soto's Back deserves to be the winner. There is good news, however, which is that I've read 2 of the nominees for this category that didn't win, and I enjoy both of them quite a bit and will happily recommend them to you. So the first one is Trust by Hernan Diaz. This is a very weird book, but I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. This is a story told in 3 parts, and it can definitely feel a little meandering, pointless, confusing at times. It's definitely circuitous, but I feel like if you give it time, you sort of let the slow burn sizzle, once you make it to the end, I feel like it's worth it. I only recommend reading this book if you are okay with reading for a while, not really knowing what the point is or what's going to happen or why, and just kind of surrender to the experience that Hernan Diaz is trying to deliver, because sometimes it's really worth it. And for me, Trust was a solid 4-star read. Really, really enjoyed it. The other book that was nominated that I really enjoyed for this category was Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. And this one actually just barely lost out on the win in this category. It had 95,554 votes. We're talking a just over 5,000 vote difference, which is pretty minimal considering the third place book on this list only had 42,000 votes. And for me, if I had to pick a winner out of the three that I have read that were nominated, I would pick Lessons in Chemistry. I gave this book 5 stars. I loved it. This is the story about a chemist named Elizabeth Zott who is living in the 1960s trying to work as a chemist in a very misogynistic workplace and society in general. And it's the story of her resolve to not only be herself and find success in the scientific field, but also to spread her unique mindset for the time, really focused on feminism, equality, scientific thought, rational inquiry, and also the process of grief in losing a soulmate level of love, which was heartbreaking to read about. I love this book. I found Elizabeth Zott fascinating. I really loved her as a character. All the other characters in this book are also equally amazing, even when they get less time on the page, including Elizabeth Zott's dog, 630. I really, really enjoyed this book. I thought it was beautiful. It made me cry. It made me laugh. And I'm really excited to read more from this author because yeah, big fan. So Lessons in Chemistry, 5 stars from me, and it would be my pick for the historical fiction category. Moving on to fantasy. I love fantasy. I read a lot of it. But the winner in this category is typically not my favorite, and that's because the winner seems to always be written by the same author, Sarah J. Maas. And while I enjoyed Sarah J. Maas's books once upon a time, I can no longer stomach them. They just don't work for me. If you want an example, you can go back and watch this video from last year where I read the first book in this series, Crescent City, and I ranted about how much I hated it because, good lord, did I hate it. And of course, the winner this year is the second book in that series, House of Sky and Breath, this time. And I considered reading it for about 0.2 seconds before I quickly brought myself back to reality and realized that these books are ridiculously long, like so unnecessarily long. And last year I made it through by the skin of my teeth, but I was hating my life by the time I finished the last page. Listen, I know myself. If I started reading this as part of this challenge, I knew that I would force myself to finish and I would hate every moment of it. So I didn't do it to myself this year. I didn't read it. I just couldn't. Okay, so please forgive me. Sorry, I just looked down at the description. Part of the description literally just says angels, exclamation point, demons, exclamation point, adventure, exclamation point, romance, exclamation point, suspense, exclamation point. And that just, if anything, demonstrates why these books are not for me. That is why. Anyways, so that was the winner. I didn't read it. It was a choice for the betterment of my mental health and happiness. So I apologize for not providing a rant on this one. I know some of you, there are a select few of you who really enjoy when I rant about books that I hate. Don't worry, there is at least one rant that will be included in this video, but it won't be for a book written by Sarah J. Maas. But with that being said, this is the category where I've read the most books that were nominated, so I will try to be more concise. These are all the other books that were nominated in the fantasy category that I've read. We've got Babel, The Atlas Six, Legends and Lattes, The Book Eaters, and The World We Make. My rating for all of these were 3 stars for Babel, 4 stars for The Atlas Six, 5 stars for Legends and Lattes, 5 stars for The Book Eaters, and 5 stars for The World We Make. If you want to hear my thoughts on Babel, you can watch my Dark Academia reading vlog, which is where I read this. If you want to hear my thoughts on The Atlas Six, you can watch my video where I read popular book talk books. That's where I read this one. I'll link those videos in the description box for you if you want to watch them after this. Or as always, you can head over to my Goodreads and read my reviews there if you prefer to read them. But I do have 3 5-star reads to choose from to pick a winner for this category, which sucks because I love all 3 of these, which is why I gave them 5 stars. As much as I really enjoyed The Book Eaters, I feel like I don't have quite as much of a deep love for it as I do the other 2, so I'm going to eliminate this one. Still an absolute 5-star read. If you want to hear my thoughts on The Book Eaters, this is also included in the Dark Academia reading video. But Legends and Lattes and The World We Make are both incredible. The World We Make is the second book in a duology by N.K. Jemisin. N.K. Jemisin is just fantastic at world building, and this is an urban fantasy where a city, New York in this case, is developing its own consciousness, and human avatars are selected for each borough to represent the city in a fight against an otherworldly force. And it's fantastic. The characters are amazing. The writing is really funny while still exploring some really serious, deep issues. And I just love N.K. Jemisin. I love this world. I love the characters. I love this book. Then we have Legends and Lattes, which I have now read twice. I read it once for my own enjoyment, and then I read it again for my book club. And I love this book. This is like if a warm hug was a book, it would be Legends and Lattes. This is a story about an orc named Viv who decides to open a coffee shop in a place where no one has ever heard of coffee. And she develops her own little found family of other species of mythical creatures who help her make her dream come true. And there are so many amazing descriptions of coffee, the smell, the taste. It's just so wholesome and lovely. The characters are great. The story itself is quite interesting. I love it. An absolute favorite. So how do I pick a favorite for this category? I know what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do this because I typically get really annoyed when books that are not the first in a series end up winning a category. Because if someone is looking at these as a chance to find new books to read, and they're doing what I like to do every year, which is read all the winners, if the winner is not the first book in a series, they're going to have to read multiple books to read the winner. And my general policy over the years has been, if I haven't read the other books in the series and the winner is not the first book in the series, I don't read it on principle, because I'm not going to read, 2 to however many books there are just to be able to have read the winner. So on that technicality of a rule, which isn't a real rule for the Goodreads Choice Awards, but is a rule that I feel like should be implemented by the Goodreads Choice Awards, and it's my rule, I'm going to eliminate The World We Make, even though I love this book, and I'm going to put Legends and Lattes at the top. This is my winner for fantasy for 2022. Listen, life has been hard the last couple years. We've all been through it, okay? We're all struggling. Sometimes you just need to read a book that feels like a warm hug. I certainly do. And I've already read it twice. I can see myself reading this book many, many times in the future as a comfort read. Sometimes the fantasy winner just has to be something warm and cozy and lovely and wholesome. So that is my pick. Moving on to the next category, which is romance, with 175,000 votes. I think that's the highest votes I've seen so far, was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. And this was a book that I read a little while ago before I started this challenge, and I was hesitant to read it because I'd read People We Meet on Vacation by the same author, and I hated it. I gave it 1 star, but I heard amazing things from people whose opinions I trust, and I'm glad that I did because I ended up enjoying this. I gave it 4 stars. I loved the characters. I loved the romance. We've got 2 bookish people falling in love. What could a book nerd like me who loves love more? It was really sweet and just generally a really enjoyable read. So I'm not unhappy that Book Lovers won this category, but I will say I read one of the other books that was nominated and I liked it a little bit more. So my pick, if I could choose, would be Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. This is a sapphic romance between a bisexual woman and a lesbian, and it's wonderful. Quite steamy at times, but it's also super sweet, and I really enjoyed the characters, not just our 2 protagonists, but all of the surrounding characters as well. I loved that one of the 2 main love interests had a child and the way that they were sort of integrated into the story. And the bisexual rep was awesome as well. So I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. So as much as I enjoyed Book Lovers, Delilah Green Doesn't Care has a piece of my heart. So it would take the top spot if I could choose. Moving into science fiction, another one of my favorite genres, and the winner of this category with just under 60,000 votes was Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. And I've read Mandel's work previously. I read Station 11, so I was really looking forward to Sea of Tranquility, and spoiler alert, I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. This book has multiple points of view and intertwining narratives, and I really loved how it was handled. This one was just perfectly timed on the market with some commentary on pandemics and sort of humanity in general's obsession with the perceived oncoming apocalypse. I loved the characters here. I thought it was beautifully written. Just everything in this story really came together for me in just the right way at just the right time, and I loved it. So 5 stars from me. highly recommend Sea of Tranquility if you haven't read it yet. As for the other nominees, quite a few of them are on my TBR, but I've only actually finished one of them so far, which is Mickey 7. I had an arc of Mickey 7, so it was sent to me by the publisher for review, and I thought it was okay. I gave it 3 stars. You can check out my review over on Goodreads if you want to see that, but I thought it was okay. I think it had a lot of potential, but it fell a little short for me. It was quite repetitive. There were some moments that I really didn't understand why they would have been included. It was just a bit of a missed opportunity is how I would describe it. So not bad, but also not great. So with that being said, obviously I am fully in support of the winner in this category. I think Sea of Tranquility definitely deserves the win. Moving into the horror category, and this one, this one's interesting. The winner of the horror category with just 35,000 votes was Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak. And this book got 1 star for many reasons. I'll try to be brief here. You can check out my Goodreads if you want to read the whole review, but this book is transphobic. That's just, I don't know how else to say it. It's a transphobic book. It is a dog whistle of a book. It is perpetuating really harmful stereotypes about trans children in particular, and it has extra sprinklings of badness in there too. It's not even just the transphobia, which would be more than enough for it to get a 1 star, but it's also fatphobic and also shames atheists for some reason. Well, I say for some reason like I'm confused. I'm not confused. I know why. It's because this whole book is written from a very right-wing perspective. The whole thing reads as a dog whistle for right-wing readers. And that's just it. I am honestly horrified that this book won in this category, that even 35,000 people, I say that like it's a small number, it's actually a huge number of people, would have voted for this book to win in this category. It's unsettling. This book should never have been written in the first place, but it definitely should never have been published, and it should not have as many 5-star reviews as it does. Its average rating is 4.19 on Goodreads, and that horrifies me. So yeah, I don't recommend Hidden Pictures. I really wish that I hadn't read it. It's not worth anyone's time, and it's just actively harmful. Let's just not do this anymore. I'm so tired of bigots. I'm just tired. Let's not. So moving on to other books I've read that were nominated in the horror category. There's What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield, House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson, and White Horse by Erica T. Worth. White Horse I gave 3 stars, House of Hunger was 4 stars, and What Moves the Dead was also 3 stars. You can check out my Goodreads if you want to see all my thoughts on those ones, but Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield is definitely my favorite of the lot. This one I gave 5 stars. This is yet another weird book for those of us who like weird literature. This is for you. This is a very strange, slow-paced, unsettling look at a sapphic relationship where one of the wives is slowly disintegrating, both literally and figuratively. It really feels like a fever dream laced with grief and longing. There's so much love, but there's also this creeping, unsettling dread. It's fantastic. Like I said, I gave it 5 stars. It's also perfect for those of us with thalassophobia. I've mentioned it before, the fear of large bodies of water or deep water, like an ocean or a sea. It's a good one for that. If that's your thing, if you enjoy literary masochism and reading books about deep bodies of water because they terrify you, here you go. It's great. And it focuses on a sapphic relationship so we can celebrate the LGBTQIA+ community in our horror instead of using them as a gross transphobic twist. Moving on to the next category, which is humor. This is not my go-to genre. I don't really read humor books. Last year, I did read the winner and it became one of my favorite books of the year, so that was great. But this year I just felt like maybe that wasn't going to happen, and I apologize, but I didn't read the winner. The winner with 37,000 votes was The Office BFFs by Jenna Fischer and Angela Kinsey. And I've seen The Office before, but I haven't seen all of it, and I've only seen the episodes I've seen one time. It's a show. I have laughed while watching it, but I'm not a huge fan or anything. And I found a copy and I thought about reading it. And then it occurred to me that life is short. And I don't care enough, you know? I'm sure this book is great for people who are big fans of The Office. I'm sure it's funny. I just felt no impulse whatsoever to read it. So I didn't. And unsurprisingly, I have read 0 of the other nominees on this list. So we're just going to skip it because I have no idea if any of them deserve to win or not. I also feel like I'm not a good judge of what should win in the humor category because I don't read books from this genre literally ever, with the exception of reading last year's winner. So anyway, moving on to the next category, which is nonfiction. And the winner in this category, with just over 34,000 votes, was Atlas of the Heart by Brené Brown, mapping meaningful connection and the language of human experience. And this book is sort of structured as a dictionary of sorts of, I think, 83 different emotions and experiences that Brené Brown has come across in her research. And she talks about them through the whole book and then talks a little bit at the end about her belief about how learning and understanding all of these emotions and experiences, having the language to fully express our emotional experiences with ourselves and others, can foster connection, which I don't disagree with. And in the first, third of this book, I was getting worried. It was feeling very surface level, very almost like a draft, a little unfinished. I was worried that it wasn't really going to do anything for me. And I will say that it definitely has a bit of a overview vibe. It is trying to cover 83 different emotions and experiences, and it's trying to define every single one, sort of talk about the interplay between them and give some advice for identifying different ones and maybe better ways to process some of them. So it is a tall order to try to cover all of that in a single book. It's a very broad concept. And I did feel like in the second 2/3 of the book or so, it did a better job of diving deeper and getting a little bit more into the nitty-gritty and the complexity of these emotions and experiences, which is more what I was expecting. And there were definitely some moments that really stood out to me, some sections that I really resonated with. I tabbed quite a bit, as you can see. I will say that most of the sections that I was tabbing as quotes that resonated with me or thought-provoking ideas, most of those were actually quotes that Brené Brown was quoting someone else. I will say that sort of part of the thesis of this book that she reiterates at the end is this idea that for her, understanding all of these emotions is sort of the gateway to understanding ourselves and loving ourselves, and that we have to understand and love ourselves on a deep level to be able to understand and love anyone else on a deep level. And I just fundamentally disagree with that concept. I really, really hate the idea that is so pervasive that we have to fully understand and know ourselves and fully love ourselves before we can fully understand and love anyone else. I think that's such a harmful idea. I can understand where it comes. Sorry, I had to put down the book. It's so heavy. I can understand where it comes from, and I certainly agree that having the language to fully understand and express our own emotional experiences can really help with connection with other people. And I think everyone should strive for fully understanding and loving themselves. I think that's such a wonderful goal to have, but it can be a lifelong one. I don't think I fully understand and know myself now at 30. I don't think I'll fully understand and know myself at 60 or 90. I think it's a constant journey. It's a constant exploration, and we're also always changing and flowing and evolving. Maybe it's semantics. Maybe she doesn't mean it the way that I'm interpreting it, but I just don't love that idea that, sort of gatekeeping our ability to reach out and have deep connections until we have figured ourselves out fully in every way. All that being said, I did enjoy Atlas of the Heart. I would probably give it 4 stars. It's not a 5-star for me, but it definitely has value. I appreciate what Brown is trying to do with it. And I haven't read any of the other nominees in this category, so for that reason, I guess this one deserved to win. Moving into the next category, which is Memoir and Autobiography, and the winner in this category with over 200,000 votes, this must be the most votes of any category so far, goes to I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. And this is one that I read a little while ago because it was all over the internet. Everyone was talking about this book, and it's a hard one to read. This is a book about surviving Hollywood as a child star with an abusive mother. It's about Jeanette McCurdy's experience of child abuse, an eating disorder, and later addiction. It's really raw and vulnerable, and I'm really appreciative that McCurdy had the bravery to write this and put it out there, because I think we don't talk enough about the realities of Hollywood for anyone, but especially children in Hollywood and the lack of protections for them. And we don't talk enough about the realities of abusive mothers, because mothers can and do abuse their children. And Jeanette McCurdy is an example of what that does to someone when someone who is meant to be your support and your safe person, your safe space, becomes the most dangerous element in your life. It was heartbreaking. I gave it 4 stars. The writing style was not my favorite, but Jeanette McCurdy is not a writer. A very powerful book. I haven't read any of the other nominees in this category, so again, I'm going to say, sure, this one deserves to be the winner because I can't compare it to any of the others. Moving on to history and biography, the winner in this category with 22,711 votes was Bad Gays, A Homosexual History by Hugh Lemmy and Ben Miller. And for full transparency, I have not fully finished listening to the audiobook. I am on chapter 10 about J. Edgar Hoover. So I will just give you my thoughts so far. Right now I'm hovering around a 3-star rating, but by the time I'm editing this video, I will have finished. So the book card will have my final rating on it. But so far, I'm finding the book really interesting, but I find the premise a little disorganized is not the word. I feel like the title and the subtitle and the stated premise of the book, which is to explore problematic historical figures who happen to be gay, it's not really aligned with the choices that they've made in terms of the figures that they are covering. There are people in this book whose badness is never covered or defined, and there was even one that I enjoyed the chapter, but the first thing that came to me when it finished was, okay, but how were they bad? Were they bad? Which is kind of the whole idea of the book. And I did some Googling and I discovered the ways in which they could be considered bad, but none of those things were actually included in the chapter. So as much as I'm enjoying the information I'm learning, I'm finding the way that they're tying together different figures, different moments in history with sort of the development of our understanding of homosexuality really fascinating. I just feel like the premise, again, isn't really matching what the book is. This is another category where I haven't read any of the other nominees. So as of right now, I'm just saying, sure, cool. This is a good winner. Moving on to the next category, which is graphic novels and comics. And the winner in this category with 138,000 votes was Heartstopper Volume 4. And as I mentioned earlier in this video, my personal rule is that if I haven't read the earlier books in a series, I won't read the winner if it is a later book in a series. Did that make sense? I did not read it. I hear great things about Heartstopper in general, but today was not the day. I also haven't read any of the other books that were nominated. Moving on to the next category, which is poetry. And the winner in this category with just under 45,000 votes was Call Us What We Carry by Amanda Gorman. I started this book months ago and then got distracted and stopped. I'm not a huge poetry reader, and I do feel like I struggle with figuring out the best way to read poetry, because when I read it cover to cover, I feel like I just start sort of reading too quickly and not allowing the poems to live on their own as individual things. And even though these poems are connected and related to each other, I just feel like they deserve to have a moment to themselves. So I tried to read this in sections. It is split into sections, and to give each poem a moment to settle before moving on, and that was helpful to me. I definitely found that there were some poems that didn't necessarily stick with me, as I think anyone would find with a collection of poems. There's going to be some that just sort of don't stand out to you, but I did use quite a few tabs. All on the sides are all my favorite lines or stanzas that just extra stood out to me. And then along the top, I marked all my favorite poems. So I did have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 poems that I loved enough to tab as a favorite. And just in general, I really enjoyed the experience of reading this. Poems about the pandemic and being Black in America, about history and slavery and the future and despair and hope. It's beautiful and moving, and I gave it 5 stars. I have not read any of the other nominees, although I am very much looking forward to reading Time as a Mother by Ocean Vuong, which was in second place. That I will definitely get to. But because I haven't read any of the other poetry collections that were nominated, and because I loved this one and gave it 5 stars, I think it is a deserved winner. Moving on to the next category, which is debut novel, and the winner with 64,000 votes was Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. So I already talked about Lessons in Chemistry earlier in this video, gave it 5 stars. I loved it. I did read some of the other books that were nominated in the debut category. I read Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sue Lynn Tan. Unfortunately, it was not my favorite. I gave it 2 stars. It read like very young YA to me, and it just didn't meet the expectations I had for it. The characters were not as well developed as I would like. The writing was very melodramatic. There was a lot of purple prose. It was very formal, but the characters were incredibly immature, and it didn't really hit the spot for me. The Maid by Nita Prose was also nominated in this category. Already talked about it in this video, gave it 1 star, was not a fan. Kaikei by Vaishnavi Patel was also nominated as a debut, and I loved it. I read this book in January, and it was just fantastic. I loved the character of Kaikei. I loved focusing on a slightly older character. We do meet her when she's a young adult, but most of the book focuses on her once she is a mother and as a fully grown adult. I loved that Kaikei was such a complex and flawed and real feeling character, and I also loved that the main character was asexual. Anyways, I really enjoyed it. I would love to read more from this author in the future, and I give it 5 stars. Another nominee was Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield, which I already talked about in this video. Also gave it 5 stars and absolutely loved it. So, how to pick a favorite? I think because I would personally choose Lessons in Chemistry as a better winner in the historical fiction category. And same with Our Wives Under the Sea, it would be my pick for horror if it were up to me. So Kaikei is the perfect choice here. I think it definitely deserved to win in the debut novel category. So that would be my pick. Moving on to young adult fiction. The winner in this category with 72,000 votes was The Final Gambit by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. And this is a later book in a series, so once again, my rule applies. I did not read it. I did read one of the books that was nominated in this category, however, which was I Kissed Shara Wheeler by Casey McQuiston. I really like Casey McQuiston as an author, but this book sort of fell short for me. I gave it 3 stars, but it wasn't my favorite, so I don't feel great about saying that it deserves to be the winner, but it's the only one I've read. So I feel like I kind of have to, give it my vote. But it's a very meh vote from me. Moving on to the penultimate category, which is young adult fantasy. The winner with 40,467 votes was Gallant by V.E. Schwab. And this book, as you can see, I tabbed a lot. Usually if I tabbed a lot, it either means that I loved it or hated it. Luckily, in this circumstance, it means I loved it. I really, really enjoyed this book. It was not at all what I expected going into it. To be honest, I read very little about it before I bought it. I just thought it looked interesting on the shelf when I was at the bookstore, and I've read V.E. Schwab's work before and enjoyed it, so I thought, why not? It is YA, so the protagonist is younger, but it didn't have so many of the YA tropes that drive me up the wall. Our protagonist is young, but she's not irritatingly immature, and the story itself was actually quite dark. Much darker than I expected it to be honest, but kind of creepy and unsettling, very interesting. I love V. Schwab's imagination. I feel like she comes up with these really interesting and unique worlds and does a great job of filling out the worlds in a way that makes them feel so tangible. The MC in this book is mute, which was really interesting to read. She communicates with nonverbal communication and a little bit of sign language. I really appreciated that diversity and found the character herself really layered and complex and interesting to follow. The mystery in this book was really fascinating. I loved the way that it slowly unraveled. There were some slightly predictable, mistakes or information held back that, while reading, you're thinking, okay, obviously this is going to happen and it could have easily been avoided. That's maybe a little bit of the YA-ness coming through, but honestly, it didn't bother me too much while reading, which is great. The ending is incredibly emotional and poignant. I really enjoyed this. It was a pleasant surprise how much I liked it and how quickly I read it. And I got very emotional, especially at the end. I cried a lot. So for me, this was a 5-star read. Really, really enjoyed it. And I have only read one of the other nominees. I am in the midst of reading another one, The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie O, and I gave it 4 stars. Overall, it was great. I would recommend it. The main reason why I dropped it to 4 stars was some of those really common YA tropes, the most egregious of which is an ancient godlike being of a man falling in love with a barely legal human woman. The power dynamics are not cute. So that was the main trope that really sort of threw me off. And there were a couple other sort of YA tropes that were not my favorite that dropped it from a 5 to a 4 star. But overall, it was a really great read. I would recommend it. So with all that being said, I think Gallant is a worthy winner of this category. Really, really enjoyed it. And I'm glad that I had the opportunity to read it. And the last category, finally, it feels like I've been talking for hours, probably because I have. But the final category is middle grade and children's, and the winner with 26,266 votes, which is a very satisfying number of votes, was I Am Quiet, A Story for the Introvert in All of Us by Andy Powers and illustrated by Betsy Peterson. And I have not read this one. I was unable to get it from my library, which I was really hoping to do. So I can't give my thoughts on it, unfortunately. I also haven't read any of the other nominees. I am not a big middle grade or children's book reader in general, but this does sound like a really cute book about introverts, and as an introvert, I would like to read it. So if I do manage to read it in the future, I will add my thoughts in the comments down below and or in the description box so that you know what I thought of it. So that brings us to the end of this video. I'll put up on the screen all of the actual winners of the Goodreads Choice Awards now so you can see them, and then I'll switch it to my choices. This video is probably going to be a long one. I can just imagine future editing me is pulling her hair out about how much I rambled in this video, but I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know any and all thoughts you have about the books discussed in this video. If you've read any of them, I would really love to hear your thoughts. And leave some sort of book-related emoji in the comments if you made it all the way to the end, because you really didn't have to, and I appreciate it. And this is a long one, so I know you're a real one. Thanks so much for watching this video. Thanks to Ana Luisa for sponsoring. Don't forget to use the link in the description box and my code Elizabeth20 to get 20% off your purchase. And thank you to my patrons, as always, for your support. I appreciate you so, so much. And with that, I'm going to get going. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.